elect a federal government willing to enforce federal law. And here's the conundrum, Alex, from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama, from a conservative Republican to a liberal Democrat, everything in between, the two Bushes, Clinton and Carter. No American president since Richard Nixon has been willing to enforce the immigration laws. I'll repeat it. No American president since Richard Nixon has been willing to enforce the immigration laws. And every American president since Richard Nixon has added to the social safety net for people who can't work or don't want to work or want to be taken care of by the government.
Yeah, your grandparents didn't get any welfare. They broke their back to build the country.
Correct. Correct. The welfare started with FDR, and every president has made it worse. So this is not a problem that can be resolved by interfering with constitutional liberty. I love the idea of hardworking people coming here and experiencing and enjoying the American dream. But I do not love interfering with their constitutional liberties and mine, because if they can stop somebody on the basis of the way they look, which the Constitution prohibits, in order to find out if they're here legally, then they could stop somebody on the basis of the way they look to find out if they ate too much salt or ate too much sugar or whatever else the government wants to regulate.
Sure, but and we know these checkpoints 50, 75 miles in all over the country, even in places like Vermont and Maine, they are using it to harass citizens, and they let the illegals go right through. So we know that all these things you're warning about are actually already manifesting themselves. So here's the big question. Looking at the legislation, the way I see it, it says if they have suspicion, probable cause, you see 10 guys at a day labor site piling into the back of a truck, then you can pull them over. Or if you pull somebody over who's swerving and they don't have IDs, and you arrest them for drunk driving, they can now be deported when it's proven that they're an illegal. I mean, what was Arizona thinking? If you're saying, and I respect you, that you've read the bill as a constitutional law scholar, and you're saying you believe it's unconstitutional, then what should they have crafted? Because Texas is about to get on board, according to NBC, and other states are flocking to do this.
They should curtail the social benefits that they provide. But in fairness to Arizona, this is all part of the big problem that you and I talk about all the time, which is the micromanagement of all government by the federal government. Much of what Arizona spends on social welfare is mandated by the federal government. They have no choice but to do it. The only way not to do it would be to nullify the federal law, or to secede from the union, or to persuade the electorate to elect people to Congress that will get rid of the social welfare state that actually started with Abraham Lincoln, but in a direct way with Franklin Roosevelt. Now, that's not going to happen overnight, but I've got to say two things. One, I did not know about the internal checkpoints 50 miles in until you told me about that, and it is my job to know these things, so I am deeply grateful to you for that. My great fear is that this immigration issue in Arizona will be used by people like Chuck Schumer and Lindsey Graham, and I'm not just picking them out of the blue. They've proposed the legislation which basically says, all these immigrants, legal and illegal, they have to have an ID card. But since the federal courts won't let us discriminate between Americans and immigrants, we're going to make everybody have an ID card. So you can't do anything without showing that ID card. Then East Germany is here, and maybe even the antebellum South. Why do I say that? Because this Arizona law lets you stop people on the basis of the way they look. Now, you know what I look like, Alex. If I don't shave for 2 days and I fall asleep in the sun and I wake up in Phoenix, they're going to stop me.
And that's not going to be fun. That's going to create a lot of angry people.
I'm making fun of myself and my own looks. But we live in a society where the government can't do that, where the government can't demand your papers, where the police can't stop you unless they have objective evidence of crime called probable cause, or a search warrant signed by a judge to whom they presented probable cause.
Well, let me tell you a story. Driving around in his Monte Carlo, he's been dead for years. My grandfather was out in the Texas Hill Country, 200-plus miles from the border. He was pulled over by the Border Patrol, and I'm going to print the article and I'll give you the name of it right now, but it's up on screen. But yes, sir, there is a 100-mile, but they normally only go in 75, buffer zone around the entire country. It's an internal border, 100 miles in, and it's basically a Constitution-free zone, is what the ACLU calls it.
I agree with the ACLU, and from the reports of it that I have learned about because of your exposure of it. You are correct. It is patently unconstitutional. It may not exist, and I'm waiting for a federal judge to comply with his or her oath to uphold the Constitution and invalidate it. Of course,
have you seen the video of the Pastor Anderson,
no,
who owns a construction company, and he has to drive through these every day, and he said, "Stop searching my car," so they beat him within an inch of his life?
I did not know that. Did he bring an action against them? Did he get their videotapes?
We need to get him back on about that. You know, we cover this stuff, and then, you know, it's in the rearview mirror, and we never look at it again. I want to shift gears into some other issues here in a moment with the limited time we have with Andrew Napolitano. His new book is out, doing quite well. Lies the Government Told You, Myth, Power, and the Deception in American History. Judge Andrew P. Napolitano, forward by Congressman Ron Paul. But just in closing, the states are going to move to protect themselves. They are going bankrupt predominantly because of the illegals and the way they draw on the welfare. We have sanctuary cities. We have Austin cops that have told me they won't arrest illegals for drunk driving because they just get released and they're basically told not to do it. My issue is the illegals now have more rights than citizens in these sanctuary cities.
Wow. You know, it's the world turned upside down. You and I talked about the census. Again, I'll give you an example. Knock on the door. It's a census taker and an FBI agent. The FBI agent is there to arrest you. The census taker is there to ask you questions. The census taker says, how many people live here and how many toilets do you have? The FBI agent says, you have a right to remain silent. So you have more rights as a person being arrested than you do as a person being visited by a bureaucrat from the census taker. The federal government has succeeded in turning the world upside down in terms of where freedom should be, in terms of where rights should be, and in terms of who can do what with their property. How do we stop this? We stop this by the things that you and I do, exposing what the government does. The camera is the new gun, filming what the government does, filming the negotiations away of our liberty and our property, so that everybody can see how those who work for us have betrayed us and the Constitution they've sworn to uphold.
Judge, and how about starting with getting our counties and cities back and making our police chiefs have equal enforcement of the law when they catch illegals without insurance, without driver's license? They arrest a citizen, they let the illegals go. When they catch an illegal drunk driving, we're just going to have to keep them in jail as long as we keep an American citizen in jail. But Americans are seen as the big fat milk cows, regardless of what color we are, to this system.
Well, I don't know of these cases of which you speak, Alex, in which Americans have been punished for longer than illegals. Are you telling me that the states have been forced to let illegals go who should be incarcerated because only the feds can incarcerate them? That's ridiculous. If an illegal breaks a state law, that illegal can be prosecuted, and if found guilty fairly in a court of law, because the Constitution protects persons, the illegal has the same due process rights as the rest of us.
And when they get out of prison,
like anybody else.
And when they get out of prison, you can pull this up in the Houston Chronicle. In fact, pull up, I believe that the headline was 200,000 felons released, 200,000 illegal alien felons released in Texas. And I think that was 2004. I remember that headline. Here it is, ACLU, 2/3 of U.S. population lives in Constitution-free zone. And then it goes over the map of the 100-mile border zone. And you can pull that up. But certainly this is a constitutional crisis that we're going into, because I understand you're a pure libertarian, a pure constitutionalist, and I respect that. And I understand the issues you're raising here, and they're all valid. But what do you do when the federal government's been seized by offshore banks and is at war against the Constitution? What do you do when the illegals are coming in and being forged into a political weapon of the collectivist?
The states formed the federal government and not the other way around. Reagan reminded us of that in the second paragraph of his first inaugural address. The states gave limited, specific, precise, delegated, discrete powers, only 16 of them, to the federal government in the Constitution. Now, when I say this to gatherings all over the country, I say the following, and nothing gets a bigger applause than this. Power given by the states can be taken back. That's what you do. And when the Chuck Schumers and Lindsey Grahams of this world realize that their empire is shrinking, they will either comport themselves as those who love freedom, or they will have no empire over which to reign.
And that brings me to our next issue, but I did want to give you the federal statute. Federal statute 8 CFR 287.1A1-3 defines the border zone for enforcement purposes as encompassing an area within 100 miles of the actual border. And they're now